Just knowing how to code is not enough anymore. At the beginning of my career, the only focus that I had was being the best coder that I could be. And for a time that worked out. But these days things are a lot different. And it's obvious that if you only focus on the technical aspect of things, you're gonna have a much harder time getting a job. So since we've seen that this landscape for software has changed a lot, I'm gonna talk about 3 things that you need to focus on to actually give you a better chance of convincing someone to hire you. A lot of people misunderstand what the actual purpose of a software developer is, and it's really just to solve problems. Your goal is to solve problems in an automated fashion. I saw this very early in my career when I had one of the strangest interview questions that I can remember. At the time, I didn't understand why the interviewer was asking me a question like this, but as I went further along in my career, I started to think back on it and it made complete sense. So I'm in this technical interview, I'm super nervous, but I'm trying to get through it. And then out of nowhere, the interviewer asked me, okay, we're in this building, how would you make an exit plan for fire escape for this particular building? And I'm thinking, what kind of question is this? Like, I'm not a fireman, I haven't gotten any fire training, I have no idea. This is what I'm thinking internally. I'm like, how could I possibly come up with a fire exit for a building I've only been in one time? But this was the entire point of the question. They wanted to see how I would look at a problem and come up with a solution for something that was brand new to me or for something that I had very limited information on. So I had to think about all the information that was available to me that I could possibly use to point me in the right direction. But to be 100% honest, I did not answer this question well. It threw me completely off guard. I was making up all kinds of stuff, and to no surprise, I didn't get that job. They never gave me a ton of detail as to why I didn't get the job, but I'm sure that question was probably a big part of it. If you can be the best coder in the world, but you can't turn a problem into a solution or find a way to get the information that you need to turn that problem into a solution, they will never hire you. So how do you take a problem and start to think of solutions? The first step on solving any problem is to be 100% clear of what the problem is. So you need to ask questions to get more details about the problems, trying to anticipate what someone may need as a solution for the problem, and understanding any kind of limitations related to the problem. And then you really have to look for information, almost like a hunt. So this means researching who or what may be potentially impacted by your solution, or who could benefit from your solution, whether they're aware of it or not. Now, once you have all the information related to the problem, then you have to brainstorm some solutions. And there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to these solutions. And I think that was probably the big reason of how I messed up in that interview question. I always thought that there was just a right or a wrong answer, and it wasn't. They were looking for some collaboration so we could come up with a solution together. Now, everything is on the table here. You're checking each solution and you're trying to gauge and trying to grade which one could be best. Now, once you decide on a solution, you have to break it down into smaller, actionable parts. Kind of like a step-by-step way of delivering on a solution in a bigger picture. And you'll see, in your development team, you'll have stories that may be part of an epic. And all this is basically just steps broken down smaller and smaller and smaller until it just gets to you and I have to fix this page or I have to create this script to do something. But when we put all of this work together over time, the project will be completed as a whole. Then the last step is to test your solution and figure out a way if you can refine it or make it better. Even though you have made a solution and it's working, it could probably still be improved. It can be enhanced over time. And that's something you want to make clear when they ask you these type of tricky questions in your interview. Now, if you can adapt this mindset of problems and solutions and not just object-oriented programming or JavaScript shortcuts, it's going to help you a lot more when you're talking to someone for a potential job. Not only will it help you when you're trying to get a job, it will also help you for the rest of your career. Problems and solutions. It's a common misconception with software development that all we're doing is just punching keys. Well, we are punching a lot of keys, but that we're not talking to anyone. We're just in this dark dungeon coding alone. And that's really not the case. Communication is huge in this field. No matter what level you are in, if you're a junior to a senior to an architect, it doesn't matter. Especially if your development team is working in Agile. You have all these meetings where you're checking on progress of things, and you have to be very open. You have to communicate very well of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and if you're having any issues. Your ability to communicate is going to determine how well you fit in with your team and overall how well people view you in general. One of the biggest pet peeves in any development team is someone that is very technical, but they're terrible at communicating. So what does this mean as far as communication exactly when we're talking about software development? Communication is basically you being able to get your ideas across to someone that is technical and non-technical so they know exactly what's going on with you and what you're working on and that there are no surprises. You can have the same information, but it's going to sound completely different if you're talking to somebody else that's a developer on your team versus the end user that has no idea about any technical terms at all. And you have to be able to relate to both of these people. So how do you improve on your communication? The first and probably the most important is you really have to be an active listener. Now, active listening is how well you can focus on what someone is saying, process it, and give an effective response. And believe it or not, a lot of people struggle with this. By really listening to stakeholders and your development team, you better understand what they need as a whole, which will help you to to think better in terms of problems and solutions. It can be difficult at times to explain technical concepts to someone that's non-technical, but the majority of the time, this is what you're gonna be doing. But an easy way to communicate with someone that's non-technical is just to think of beginning to ending. All they wanna know is how you're gonna fix their problem and how it will impact them or their team directly. And that's really it. They don't care how long you've been trying to fix this bug or how long you've been trying to implement this enhancement. They do not care about that. They just wanna know when and how. So if you can explain or give even just a timeline of what you're working on, how the team is gonna approach it in a more general sense, that'll take care of the non-technical people. Communication with the development team, this is gonna be a lot more technical. When you're working in software, it's almost like a sports team. The more that you all talk and communicate with each other, the easier and the more success you'll have. If anybody plays sports, then you know how this is. You can't play any sport, any team sport effectively without talking. It just doesn't work. I grew up playing a lot of basketball, and all of my coaches would get absolutely furious if we were not communicating on the court. And it's the same way with your development team. So if you're working on a bug, if you're gonna be touching code that someone else has touched recently, everyone should know what you're up to and you should know what everybody else is doing. So that way you don't step on each other's toes and you don't end up doing double work in the end. But overall, communication really isn't that hard. It's really just explaining the things and sharing the information that you will hope that someone would share with you to make your job easier. Then you have reading documentation. I remember vividly my second job working in software, and I was still a junior developer, and I got assigned this bug to fix. This was related to a specific API, and I was having a lot of trouble with it. Until eventually I just decided to ask one of the senior guys, can you please show me what I'm doing wrong with this? He said, sure, I'll take a look at it with you. And he came back in maybe an hour and a half, and he had already fixed it. And I asked him, like, well, how did you fix this so fast? I've been working on this for a while, and I couldn't get anywhere. And he said, all I did was read the documentation. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, reading documentation is not the most exciting thing that you will ever do in your software career, but it's probably one of the most helpful things that you can do. Because a lot of times the things that you're looking for, or sometimes even information that you might not even know is out there, is in the documentation, and it all can help you. So if you're curious about a particular method that potentially may be available in JavaScript, then you can go to read the documentation on Mozilla. If you're having issues with making REST calls with a particular API, then that API should have some documentation to guide you along as well. Now, don't get me wrong that YouTube and Google searches will get you pretty far, but I've noticed that anyone that is more skilled than me and the developers that I admire how they do their work and how professional they are, their first reaction is to always go to documentation. It's not to go to YouTube. So how do you get better with reading documentation? It really just comes down to anything else. Repetition and some dedication. So the next time you're on a project or you're trying to build something, instead of going to rush to YouTube or going to rush to Google, check and see if there's some documentation available first and try to work your way through that first before you start looking for a quick answer. It's going to be painful, it's going to be frustrating, but as you start to work on this skill and get better at this skill, it's going to help you for the rest of your career, without a doubt. That's what I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.